In the streets of Detroit, where survival means navigating a world filled with risk and power, there are names that echo through the city's history. These are not just names, but legends, feared and respected by everyone, their influence reaching far beyond the city limits. From the dark alleys to the toughest neighborhoods, these figures carved their marks on Detroit, shaping its future and leaving behind a legacy of dominance. Today, we're going to explore the most dangerous gang members in Detroit's history. These were the leaders who ran the show, the ones whose strategies and decisions controlled entire territories, creating fear and respect in equal measure. How did they rise to power? What set them apart from the countless others who tried and failed? Join us as we dive into the untold stories of Detroit's most feared figures and uncover the rise of the city's most powerful gang members. Number 10. Dwayne Peterson, the 38-year-old leader of the It's Just Us IGU street gang, was sentenced to life in prison in 2023 for his involvement in a series of violent incidents, racketeering, and illicit substance trafficking. Peterson, who was at the helm of the IGU gang from its formation in 2014 until its dismantling in 2019, played a central role in terrorizing Detroit and other regions for nearly 5 years. Under his leadership, the gang grew to approximately 40 members at its peak, operating with a brutal and ruthless mindset that left a trail of destruction in its wake. Peterson's criminal activities were vast, ranging from orchestrating violent acts to running an extensive network for trafficking illicit substances. He was directly involved in a series of violent encounters that underscored his dangerous reputation. One of the most chilling episodes took place in May 2017, when Peterson, in retaliation for an alleged insult to one of his associates, tracked down a man, pursued him, and executed him in cold blood. The victim, a 33-year-old man, was shot in the back of the head while lying defenseless on the ground. This senseless act of violence shocked the community and marked just one example of Peterson's willingness to use extreme measures to assert dominance. The following year, Peterson was implicated in another violent episode in which he and another gang member fired shots at a car full of bystanders. The car had been stopped at a red light when its occupants witnessed Peterson beating a woman in a liquor store parking lot. Without warning, Peterson opened fire on the vehicle, risking the lives of innocent people simply for having been in the wrong place at the wrong time. In addition to his violent acts, Peterson was also the mastermind behind a large-scale operation that distributed illicit substances, including fentanyl-laced illicit substances, across multiple states. The gang's network extended into Detroit, Jackson, Flint, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, where Peterson and his associates trafficked these dangerous substances. Evidence presented at trial showed that Peterson ran a tightly controlled operation with at least 15 individuals working under him, moving the illicit substances to meet the growing demand. His gang's activities played a significant role in fueling the opioid crisis in the areas they operated, exacerbating the harm caused by the widespread use of these substances. Peterson's criminal empire was eventually brought to an end following an extensive investigation led by the FBI with the support of the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, and local law enforcement. In 2019, Peterson was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including engaging in racketeering, participating in violent acts, and trafficking illicit substances. After a lengthy trial, Peterson was convicted on all counts, including manslaughter in aid of racketeering and conspiracy to traffic illicit substances. His decision to go to trial, while 7 of his co-conspirators pleaded guilty, ultimately led to his conviction. On April 11, 2023, Peterson was sentenced to a mandatory life sentence by U.S. District Judge Robert H. Cleland, sealing his fate and ensuring that he would never again threaten the safety of the community. Number 9. Corey Bailey of the 7 Mile Bloods gang. Corey Bailey, also known by his street name Cocaine Sonny, was a prominent and notorious member of the 7 Mile Bloods, a violent street gang that operated in the east side of Detroit. Bailey's criminal history is marked by a long series of violent actions and criminal enterprises, making him one of the most dangerous figures within the gang. The 7 Mile Bloods, who controlled the red zone of Detroit, were involved in numerous illegal activities, including the trafficking of illicit substances, firearms offenses, and violent retaliations against rivals. Bailey, who was deeply entrenched in the gang's operations, held a significant leadership position within the 7 Mile Bloods. He was known for his ruthless nature, using extreme violence to enforce the gang's dominance in their territory. The area, defined by the zip code 48205, was notorious for frequent shootings, gang conflicts, and escalating violence. Bailey, like many others in the gang, did not hesitate to engage in violent confrontations, and his role in these disputes often escalated the situation. One of the most notorious aspects of the gang's activities was the shooting war between the 7 Mile Bloods and rival gangs, which began after a 2014 incident. This war resulted in a surge of violent acts across Detroit's east side, with Bailey playing a central role in orchestrating some of the attacks. Bailey's criminal behavior included not just participating in these violent acts, but also in organizing them. He and his associates would frequently target members of rival gangs, and some of the attacks were publicized on social media, where gang members posted hit lists and bragged about their violent exploits. Bailey was reportedly involved in several incidents, including a high-profile attack on a rival gang member named Juan Neff Page. The event was a classic example of the kind of violent retaliation that defined the gang's tactics. In 2019, after years of investigation and mounting evidence, Corey Bailey was arrested and charged with several serious offenses. He faced charges of racketeering conspiracy, which linked him to a wide range of criminal activities within the gang. The charges also included serious allegations such as involvement in murder and attempted manslaughter, as well as illegal firearm possession used to further the gang's violent agenda. Bailey's criminal actions were not limited to street-level offenses, but were part of a larger organized effort to maintain control of the gang's territory and illicit operations. In 2020, after a lengthy trial, Bailey was convicted on multiple charges, including RICO conspiracy, manslaughter in aid of racketeering, attempted manslaughter, and firearm offenses. The jury found that Bailey had played a pivotal role in the violent crimes carried out by the 7 Mile Bloods, and the evidence presented in court painted a clear picture of his involvement in the gang's ongoing criminal activities. As a result of these convictions, Bailey was sentenced to 2 life sentences and an additional 3 10-year sentences, all of which would run concurrently. As of now, Corey Bailey remains incarcerated. Number 8. Corey DeAndre Map of the Band Crew Street Gangs. Corey DeAndre Map, a name that echoes through the streets of Detroit, is one of the most dangerous figures associated with the Band Crew Street Gang, a violent organization entrenched in criminal activity. His rise through the ranks of the gang was marked by brutality, manipulation, and ruthless ambition. Map's reputation as a leader within the band crew, and his role in the broader web of criminal enterprises, paints a clear picture of a man willing to go to any lengths to solidify his power. Corey Map's affiliation with the Band Crew Street Gang was not just a causal connection. He was a central figure in its operations. The Band Crew, notorious for its violence and illicit dealings, became more dangerous with Map at its helm. Over the years, Map's position within the gang grew, culminating in his role as one of the gang's most influential leaders. His criminal activity included violent altercations, theft, and orchestrating illicit schemes. The violence perpetrated by the band crew under his guidance was not only widespread, but also highly coordinated. Map knew how to manipulate and control his members, directing them to carry out various tasks that solidified his reputation as a ruthless leader. One of the defining characteristics of Map's criminal activity was his involvement in violent confrontations with rival gangs. Number 7. Billy Arnold. Billy Arnold, known by street names like B-Man and Killa, was once the leader of the notorious 7 Mile Bloods street gang, based in Detroit's eastern neighborhoods. His name is associated with terror, violence, and a criminal empire that dominated the area, particularly around the so-called Red Zone, the stretch of Detroit between 7 and 8 Mile roads. It was here that Arnold and his gang built their reputation, not just as a group of criminals, but as a violent force that controlled turf through fear and force. Arnold's rise to power within the 7 Mile Bloods was marked by a ruthless streak and an ability to stay ahead of law enforcement. As a gang leader, he wasn't just a figurehead. He was deeply involved in the gang's illicit operations, from managing territories to engaging in violent confrontations with rival factions. His leadership was defined by a constant and escalating gang war with rival groups, which ultimately resulted in a series of violent acts that left their mark on Detroit's streets. The violent nature of Arnold's criminal career came to the forefront in 2014. While on parole, he encountered 2 members of a rival gang during a routine parole office visit. After the meeting, Arnold chose to follow them outside, where he quickly escalated the situation by opening fire on the individuals, taking one life and leaving another seriously wounded. This act of violence was just the beginning of a wave of bloodshed that engulfed Detroit's east side. Arnold's actions ignited a violent back and forth between the 7 Mile Bloods and other street gangs, with members from both sides posting threats and hit lists on social media, fueling further confrontations. By 2015, the violence had reached a fever pitch. In just 1 month, Arnold committed multiple violent acts, including the loss of another rival gang member's life and the wounding of several others. One particularly disturbing incident involved a man who was walking with his young daughters when Arnold opened fire. The man survived but was left paralyzed, and this was just one of many close calls that marked Arnold's violent streak. Even more shockingly, Arnold shot a 15-year-old on his first day of work at a banquet hall, intending to target a rival gang member who happened to be nearby. The young victim survived, but the incident underscored Arnold's lack of concern for innocent bystanders. Arnold's criminal activities were not limited to violence. He was also involved in the distribution of illicit substances, playing a key role in the gang's control over the Red Zone and extending their reach into other areas, including West Virginia. His operations were not only profitable, but also deeply entrenched in the criminal economy, marked by intimidation, retaliation, and an ongoing culture of violence that he actively encouraged. In September 2015, after a high-speed chase with police, Arnold's reign came to an abrupt halt. He and another 7 Mile Bloods member were arrested, and investigators seized a number of firearms, including assault rifles used in some of the gang's violent acts. By this point, Arnold had already been implicated in several criminal activities, including multiple shootings, and was one of the most wanted figures in Detroit. In December 2023, after a 6-week trial, Arnold was convicted of 22 charges, including racketeering conspiracy, manslaughter, attempted manslaughter, and firearms offenses. These charges stemmed from his direct involvement in orchestrating violence, along with his role in a wider criminal network. On the day of his sentencing, Arnold was handed a life sentence in prison. Number 5. Milton Butch Jones of the Young Boys Incorporated gang. Milton Jones, once a feared leader within the infamous Young Boys Incorporated gang, a Detroit-based criminal organization, remains a significant figure in the history of organized crime in the city. Jones, who did not found the gang but rose to power after joining in 1978, was integral in expanding its operations throughout Detroit and into neighboring states. Young Boys Incorporated was notorious for its violence and illegal activities, with a particular focus on distributing illicit substances. One of the gang's most chilling practices was its use of minors to transport these substances, exploiting their legal status to avoid harsher penalties faced by adults. Under Jones's leadership, the gang reached the height of its power in the 1980s, controlling a large portion of the illicit substance trade in Detroit. Jones, a man known for his brutal and calculated approach to the criminal world, became a central figure in the operation. His ruthlessness and ability to coordinate the gang's violent activities made him one of the most dangerous individuals in the city's underworld. He was not merely a participant in the gang's illicit activities, but the mastermind behind many of its operations, including overseeing distribution networks and orchestrating acts of intimidation to ensure the gang's dominance. In 1982, the law caught up with Jones, and he was indicted along with several other leaders and members of Young Boys Incorporated. The charges were severe, including his involvement in a continuing criminal enterprise. Though Jones did not personally commit all the violent acts associated with the gang, he was held responsible for them due to his leadership role. In court, it was revealed that Jones directed a number of individuals in criminal activities, including the trafficking of illicit substances, and was considered an accessory to crimes that involved significant harm to others. Jones was convicted and sentenced to 30 years in federal prison in 2008 after pleading guilty to charges of accessory to manslaughter and other serious offenses. He admitted that, while he did not personally carry out many of the violent acts tied to his operations, he was aware that such acts were a foreseeable part of the gang's illegal activities. His position as a leader of Young Boys Inc. meant that he was legally responsible for the actions of his subordinates, particularly as he directed and controlled their operations from behind the scenes. Despite his conviction and lengthy sentence, Jones's life took another unexpected turn. He has spent over 19 years in federal prison, but his health has deteriorated significantly. At the age of 65, Jones is now confined to a wheelchair, undergoing dialysis 3 times a week, and struggling with several serious medical conditions. In an attempt to secure an early release, Jones petitioned for compassionate release, citing his age and medical condition, as well as the high risk posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. His legal team argued that the medical facilities at the federal prison where he is housed were overwhelmed by the pandemic, with hundreds of inmates testing positive and several dying. As of now, Jones remains incarcerated at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. His release is scheduled for 2027, though the possibility of early release due to his health issues is still under review. Number 4. Jerome. Jared Ray Mcneel. Jerome Jared Ray Mcneel, a prominent member of the 7 Mile Blood street gang, is a key figure in Detroit's underworld, known for his role in the violent activities that plagued the city for years. Mcneel, affiliated with the infamous 7 Mile Bloods, rose through the ranks of this gang, which operates on the east side of Detroit. The gang is known for its involvement in a range of illicit activities, including the trafficking of illicit substances, violent confrontations with rival gangs, and maintaining dominance over its territory through intimidation and force. As a member of the 7 Mile Bloods, Mcneel was deeply involved in the gang's illegal operations, which included narcotic trafficking, extortion, and violent retaliation against anyone who posed a threat to their authority. Over time, Mcneel's position within the gang became more significant, as he was known not only for his involvement in street-level crimes, but also for his role in orchestrating and executing the gang's more dangerous activities. His reputation was built on his willingness to engage in high-risk, violent actions to protect the gang's interests, making him a feared figure in the community. Mcneel's criminal activities escalated in the mid-2000s and 10s when the 7 Mile Bloods found themselves at odds with rival gangs. One of the most notable incidents involving Mcneel was during a series of violent confrontations that took place across Detroit, as the 7 Mile Bloods sought to expand their influence. Mcneel was implicated in several violent incidents, including drive-by shootings and violent assaults against rival gang members. These actions were often in retaliation for perceived slights or attempts to encroach on their territory. His criminal activities caught the attention of federal authorities, who had been investigating the 7 Mile Bloods for a series of racketeering offenses. Mcneel, along with several other gang members, was indicted in connection with a broader investigation into the gang's criminal enterprises. The indictment accused Mcneel and his associates of operating a violent racketeering enterprise that was responsible for a range of illegal activities, including the trafficking of illicit substances and violent acts aimed at maintaining control over their territory. In 2017, Mcneel was arrested as part of a coordinated effort by local and federal authorities to dismantle the 7 Mile Bloods. During his arrest, law enforcement seized firearms, large quantities of illicit substances, and evidence that tied him to a series of violent incidents. Mcneel's arrest marked a turning point in the crackdown on the gang's activities, as authorities sought to eliminate the leadership structure that had been driving the violence and chaos in Detroit. In 2020, Mcneel was sentenced to 25 years in prison after pleading guilty to several charges related to his role in the gang's violent racketeering activities. The court documents revealed the extent of Mcneel's involvement in orchestrating violent acts, including shootings and assaults aimed at rivals. Number 2. Terry Lee Flenory of Black Mafia Family Gang. Terry Lee Flenory, widely known as Southwest T, is a key figure in the rise and fall of the Black Mafia Family, BMF, one of the most notorious narcotic trafficking organizations in American history. Born on January 10, 1970, in southwest Detroit, Michigan, Terry, alongside his brother Demetrius, Big Meech Flenory, built an empire around the distribution of illicit substances, which spanned several U.S. states and reached as far as Mexico. Though he initially started in the narcotic trade at a young age, his association with BMF became legendary for its reach, its wealth, and its ruthless tactics. The Black Mafia family was born in the late 1980s when Terry and Demetrius transitioned from small-time dealers to masterminds of a massive narcotic operation. By the early 2000s, the BMF was operating on an international scale, importing and distributing large quantities of illicit substances into major cities like Detroit, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Their network, which at its peak moved hundreds of kilograms of illicit substances each month, was known not only for its efficiency, but also for the lavish lifestyle it promoted. In 2005, the Drug Enforcement Administration launched a large-scale investigation into the Black Mafia family, ultimately leading to the arrest of Terry and his brother, along with dozens of their associates. In 2008, after years of legal battles, both brothers were sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for their roles in operating a continuing criminal enterprise. In May 2020, after serving 13 years of his 30-year sentence, Terry was released from federal prison due to health concerns amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. His release was part of a broader initiative by the Federal Bureau of Prisons to reduce prison populations during the health crisis. Terry was granted compassionate release and moved to home confinement, where he continues to serve the remainder of his sentence under house arrest. Number 1. Demetrius Flenory of Black Mafia Family Gang. Demetrius Big Meech. Flenory is one of the most notorious figures in the history of organized crime in Detroit and beyond, known for his role as a leader in the Black Mafia Family, BMF. BMF, a criminal organization he co-founded with his brother Terry, Southwest T. Flenory, in the late 1980s, became one of the most powerful and lucrative narcotic trafficking networks in the United States. The group, based in Detroit, was responsible for moving significant quantities of illicit substances with a network that spanned multiple states and cities across the country. Flenory and his brother were initially involved in the distribution of illicit substances at the street level, but they quickly expanded their operation, building a nationwide empire. The BMF was known not only for the size and scope of its operations, but also for its extravagant lifestyle. The brothers and their associates lived in luxury, throwing lavish parties, buying expensive cars, and living as if they were untouchable. At the height of its power, BMF's reach extended to Hollywood, where Flenory allegedly mingled with celebrities and became a known figure in the entertainment world. The BMF was equally infamous for its ruthless business tactics and the violent measures it took to maintain control over its territory. Despite their success, the Flenory brothers' rise to power caught the attention of law enforcement. The Black Mafia family became a prime target of the DEA and FBI, who were focused on dismantling their vast narcotic operation. In 2005, after a lengthy investigation, Demetrius Flenory was arrested and charged with a wide range of federal crimes related to the distribution of illicit substances, money laundering, and racketeering. In 2007, Flenory and his brother were convicted, and Flenory was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for his role in operating the criminal enterprise. The indictment detailed how Flenory coordinated narcotic shipments and worked with multiple organizations across the country to distribute large quantities of illicit substances. As of October 17, 2024, Demetrius "Big Meech" Flenory has been released from prison to a residential program in Miami, Florida, where he is under supervision restrictions for the next 5 years.